Newsfirst Newsline with Fernando.
And a very good evening to you. This is Newsline Live, and today we are out of the studios and onto the streets. We bring you the news as it's happening, as is usual with News First. And of course, the fuel crisis has reached a very critical part, apparently, judging by the long queues in most fuel stations in Sri Lanka. We also noticed that at this particular fuel station, there is a absence of a supply of diesel. The diesel pumps are actually closed, and diesel is not available. As you see, there's a sign saying that there is no diesel, but petrol is available, and the queues are here. The police are also here trying to keep a bit of order and getting the traffic moving to prevent traffic jams, I suppose. But also tonight we have got a guest here who is the Chief Operating Officer of Advocata, Mr. Dhananath. Fernando, very good evening to you, and welcome to Marine Drive.
Good evening for us. Thank you for having me.
That's right. Now tell me, Mr. Fernando, why are we having a fuel crisis or shortage?
First, for us, there are multiple reasons. One is, of course, the shortage of dollars to import fuel. That's reason number one. But also, when you say there's a shortage of fuel because of shortage of dollars, I think we have, in a different view, people all say, and even I saw senior policymakers said that we don't really have dollars to import fuel. But my argument is we have dollars, but we have dollars. We don't have dollars at the rate of 200, but we may have dollars at the rate of 250. But of course, we may not have all the dollars in the world at 250, but at least to provide some relief to these long lines, what you see in the background. I think if we have a better exchange rate, we will have a better situation. We will not see these long queues. At the same time, to do such a small reform, we may not need an IMF to do that. So, of course, that's one reason. At the same time, over the last 5 to 6 years, our economy has been battling with multiple shocks, starting from in 2015, the central bank bond scam, then there were droughts, and then there were constitutional coup, and then there was the Easter Sunday attack, and then there was pandemic in 2020 and 2021. And now, while the world is moving away from the pandemic, we have this economic crisis. So that's another reason. But of course, our tourism have been very not performing well. Our remittances are down. That's partly because of the exchange rate problem again. And also our export industries are not doing well we wanted to do at that pace. So those are the main reasons that I see for this problem.
Mr. Fernando, don't you agree that part of the problem, the longer-term problem, has been that successive governments since independence have not broad-based Sri Lanka's income stream to much more than tea, rubber and coconut? It used to be tea, rubber and coconut. It's now tea, foreign remittances, and finally we have we have the tea and the foreign remittances. And at the moment, whilst tea is doing all right, the foreign remittances are down. But isn't there an argument to say that foreign remittances are down because of COVID? We had around 200,000 plus people working in overseas markets who have returned to Sri Lanka, and therefore necessarily the foreign remittances are down. Whilst also you have the other argument that it could be to do with the exchange rate, because the curbside market really is around 255, 257 now. Would you subscribe to that view that that's part of the problem is because of a downturn in the foreign workers who've returned to Sri Lanka?
Definitely for us. There's an impact from the foreign workers losing their jobs in Middle East and all over the world, and some of them returned. and probably they may have brought all the money, all the savings that they had in their respective workplaces. But that's one side. That's not the entire problem. That's, of course, one part of the problem. The other part is also the exchange rate, because we had, after the pandemic, we had better remittance rate than this. But as soon as we fixed the exchange rate at 200, and for remittances we provided extra 10 rupees, then we realized then the dropping the remittances number. So of course there's an exchange rate side as well on the matter. At the same time, as you very correctly said, tourism, coconut, and remittances have been the three pillars that we have been, rallying around to all our imports, fuel, and everything.
The tourism is down by, the market usually was about $5 billion a year. Remittances were around just a touch over $7 billion. Today, we are told that remittances are down to around 3,500, around roughly half. And of course, we all know that our hotels are empty, our beaches are empty, and it is only now that it started again, but very little numbers in terms of the wider picture of what we had before, pre-COVID. So we're missing $5 million there. We're missing around $3.5 billion. And that's, I suppose that's our cash flow, $8.5 billion a year. It's no easy fix, is it?
It's definitely no easy fix, but if I dive into the tourism numbers for us, I think it's slightly overestimated. Even in 2018, we said it's 4.5 billion to 5 billion US dollars. But what we have to keep in mind is also with tourism, there's a big import component, because when these tourists comes in, for them to travel to Sigiriya, Dambulla, down south, that all costs fuel. So generally about 50 to 70% component of fuel, but definitely tourism helps quite a lot. But you can't really get all the tourist inflows as inflows. It's inflows, but the higher the inflows, there's a outflow as well. That's one side. On the other side, mainly with the tourism, I think how they're calculating the number is they're doing a survey at the port of how much generally they spend during their stay. So it's averaging for about $180 per day. I think, and they're collecting it with a survey. I think per day $180 for every tourist, it's slightly an overestimation, because it's very unlikely that they will all stay at a hotel maybe ranging at about $100 to $150, because it's not all our tourists are in that same range. So I think that's slightly overestimated on one end, but definitely tourism is one thing that we are losing out. And of course, unfortunately, the geopolitics happening in Russia and Ukraine is not helping it either, because if you look at the January and February numbers, it's mainly Russia and Ukraine are in the top 5 of the tourist list. So those are all contributory factors, but my sense is basically it's multifaceted, but exchange rate is one main bottleneck. At the same time, we should not forget pandemic. It has affected us really badly, and it had fueled up the crisis that we have been in, which was brewing for the last 70 years, but it has been accelerating for the last 10 years in my view.
And Newsline Live tonight, we are live and direct from Marine Drive in Colombo, in front of a fuel station with an appropriate crowd of a line of cars. Now then, the people are frustrated, and News First is highlighting the issues that matter to you, the people of Sri Lanka. Now then, Mr. Fernando, I put it to you that once again, Sri Lanka, if there's any good that has come out of this COVID and so on, and that is to focus on what our legislators have not done since independence in the last 74 years. We have no food security. We have an ill thought out and ill advised agriculture policy in terms of the ban on fertilizer. We had over 600 billion given away in tax cuts for a country that can't really afford it. And therefore, we've finally come to the point where, you know, it's come home to roost, if you like, which is that poor policy planning, poor forward thinking has cost this country dearly, because today we are dependent mainly on the export of tea, we are dependent on tourism and on foreign remittances, our citizens who are working abroad. Now, what should be done in terms of policy? Because obviously there is no quick fix to this. What can we do? Do you have a few solutions that we can have, like, what shall we call them, instant solutions?
Yes, for us, a few instant solutions that we have is basically, as I mentioned, float the currency. That we don't need an IMF to do that. That's number one. Number two is propose a comprehensive policy plan, because when you have a policy, there will be people who will be considering to finance, because now the situation is even World Bank and places like European Union, with the crisis, they will be very reluctant to come and finance even a project that has been approved before. So that's the second thing that we could do. And third, I think we might have to ask our friendly nations to support us till we implement the reform plan that we all agree, to support us with fuel and main essentials, so then we will get some access with some IMF support to access the financial markets. And then investors will consider. But its reforms comes first. It's not the IMF, it's not debt restructuring in my view. We have to first come up with the reform plan, as you very correctly said. We have to go and say, okay, these are the fundamental changes that we are going to do into our economy. And then the investors will look at seriously. Now the problem is we don't have a reform plan. Without a reform plan, it's like you're going to the bank with empty hands and asking for a loan. They will definitely ask your business plan. So that's the fundamental need at this hour, in my view, for us.
And why is the IMF almost regarded as a bogeyman by this government, for example? Why is that? What's holding them back? If it's such an easy fix, why not go there?
I think there's a perception that generally IMF, you have to have a negotiated program, and generally the measures will add burden for people. Now, for an example, even if you float the exchange rate, of course, the fuel station, these prices may go up at about 25 to 30%, or even more than that. So those measures will add, it will not be politically favorable. When the fuel prices increase, all the goods and services prices will increase. So those things may be the reason, politically unfavorable, may be the reason which is holding back the government. But I think we really have very hard choices to make, whether we are going to keep all our people in long lines for how long. And at one point it will be, your level of patience will go out of the window. So I think we have to really prioritize our solutions. It's always will be bitter at this juncture, but we have to make the right choice, to make the right policy decisions to move forward.
And what do you say to the public who are constantly asked to tighten their belt? Surely there are no more holes in the belt anymore to break. We've come to breaking point. What do you say to them?
Yeah, we are at the breaking point, but I think this crisis will not go away that easily, because these policy solutions and reforms takes time. Generally, when I had an interview with Professor Ricardo Hausmann, who is a Venezuelan, who is a faculty member of Harvard Kennedy School, he has seen enough crises. What he said was, crisis comes slowly and suddenly, and it takes about 10 years for you to really recover it if you implement the policies at the just right time. So for public, I think we have to be hopeful that we will be able to come out of the crisis, but we have to understand we have to swallow the bitter pills, and it will take time for us to recover. But we have to hold our hope and determination hard, and overcome and work together. But I think rather than the public, it's the policymakers who have to really make that call and decision, because the end date for this crisis will determine on the starting date of policy reform. So it's best that we move to our policy reforms as early as possible. That will bring down the timeline.
And on that note, let's go for a quick break and take a peek at this evening's headlines from the Newsfirst primetime news team. We'll see you on the other side of the break, reporting live and direct from Marine Drive in Colombo, in front of a fuel station. We'll see you on the other side, shall we?
Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shaukutali.
And welcome back to Newsline Live. We are broadcasting live and direct from Marine Drive in Colombo 4. And our guest tonight is also live and direct from Marine Drive, is the Chief Operating Officer of Advocata, Mr. Dhananath Fernando. Welcome back to the program, Mr. Fernando.
Thank you for us. It's a new experience, but unfortunately, it's quite difficult for people, to also heartbreaking to see that people stays in long line. But thank you very much for having me again.
It's almost a pleasure, really. But I can't help notice that most of the folk who are driving these vehicles, they all appear to be frustrated and tired, probably at the end of a long day. But apart from, the hardships that the people are experiencing, we also have other issues, issues connected to the fundamental rights of the people. And, it's a difficult pill to swallow when you also have economic problems and then you have legal issues which affect your fundamental rights. I am, of course, talking about the proposed surcharge tax from people and companies who are earning over 2 billion rupees per year in the last tax year, 2021. Now, today the Attorney General has said that the EPF, ETF and some other funds will not be subject to that tax. However, corporate Sri Lanka and others who are earning more than that point out to the almost unequal position where, having paid the top rate of tax at 24%, another 14% on dividend tax, and they are now asked to pay 25% of those taxes before profits before tax, whilst they have already paid and distributed their dividends and made their investment plans. The retrospective nature of this tax is beginning to worry. Now then, Mr. Fernando, don't you think that if corporates are asked to pay this retrospective nature of the tax, don't you think it will stymie the progress? There'll be companies who won't be able to expand. They're going to have, their cash flows will be affected. They're going to have to find the money. And eventually, you'll have people who say, well, why should I earn over 2 billion? I might as well earn 1.95 and put a cap to that there and say, to hell with the rest. Because people won't get promotions, they won't get bonuses. What do you have to say about corporate frustrations then?
Yes, Farhad, I don't think these taxes above 2 billion is a sensible idea at this juncture, because companies are already having enough problems. They can't find fuel, there are power cuts, their employees are having a really hard time. So it's an abnormal time, even to consider that sort of an extreme move. And the final outcome would be, even the good companies, good businesses will become bad businesses. Because even those who are, the guys who are trying to survive, just keep their nose above the water, this will be a very tough time. 7-hour power cut, they are completely out of the game. Even those who could be in the game, could fight these difficult times, basically they are also going to go out from the system if we have a 25% tax rate on their profits. And of course, this is not the first time we tried this. We tried this in 2015 when the government came, but there was a Supreme Court case and it's difficult to implement it. The problem is we do not have a proper tax policy. So without fixing the problem at root, just bringing ad hoc policies such as 25% surcharge tax will be a double whammy on the entire economy. Basically, you are making the good guys bad and making the bad guys completely the opportunity even to fight back. So that's how I see it.
Now then, the electricity cuts of several hours, or in sometimes 7 hours a day, this is going to really finish off the small hoteliers, the guest house owners, and as you know, Sri Lanka's economy, Sri Lanka's tourist economy is not geared solely to the high-end market. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of rooms that are sold for the budget traveler and the middle market. And therefore, those people, some of them are only small establishments who will not have the capacity to have generators, for example. And even if they did, what about the diesel? As you saw behind there, the diesel pumps were shut because there is no diesel. So how do you relate? How can we stop this thing happening to those smaller people of our economy who are dependent on tourism? Like I said before, it was a $5 billion top-end figure, minus all the costs associated. But it is a $5 billion economy. What can they do? What can the government do? What's the solution for the government to help these small-time hoteliers and the larger ones too?
For us, basically, in an economic downturn and a period when we move to economic reforms, it will be first hard for the poor people and basically the industry-wise micro, small, medium enterprises. So in Sri Lankan setup, 99% of our establishments are micro, small, and medium enterprises. So what the government could do is, we have been saying as Advocata, we introduced 7 main policies to overcome this crisis. And number one, the first one is to having a cash transfer system for the most vulnerable sectors of the economy. I think the government has to prioritize that. It may take a little time, but even if it takes time, it is better to have that system rather than not having that system at all. So that's number one that we could do. Second is identifying the sectors and provide some relief, especially on electricity, and prioritize them is one other solution, but it will be short term. Long term, what we have to do is, as I mentioned, we have to have a better pricing mechanism for fuel. And when the Brent price is above $100 a barrel, there is no way we can sell the fuel at this price. So definitely we have to have a price revision, and that price revision will have an impact on the electricity bill as well as the water bill and some of the other utilities and main essentials. That's unavoidable. But I think it's still better to have a higher price rather than not having those products and services at all. So that's my argument. Of course, if the prices are lower, it's better, but not having it all and complete emptiness of the shelves and shortages is the worst case, because even if someone would have money, will be having a problem. That's my view.
Now, Mr. Chanima Weerakodi, the former the petroleum minister and now a member of parliament, a couple of days ago, he said that actually there are dollars because he noticed that there are apples and oranges and other imported items. And he's suggesting in a way that these dollars are only available to the henchayas of the government of the day. Is that something that you too have noticed? I've certainly noticed that the supermarkets do have these things.
For us, it depends on how you see the problem. Basically, these imports on vegetables and fruits and all that are just a fraction. And when you have a dual exchange rate, of course, as the Honorable Minister had said, there could be multiple scandals. And it provides the consent power to the banks to favor some of the business people. It's unavoidable. That's why I always recommend to have a single exchange rate and to have it at the market rate. But of course, when you compare our imports, the single largest import is fuel. It's about $3.5 billion or so, depending on the market, the Brent price. So I think rather than just cutting these corners, of course, in today's world, apples and oranges are not consumed by rich people. It's pretty much the poor people who consume those fruits, because of course they can't afford other fruits which are locally grown. So in that sense, I really don't recommend curbing the imports furthermore. What you could do is increase the prices of those imports by an exchange rate policy rather than trying to cut it at the customs or at the border.
And as we come to towards the end of our program, I think we ought to remind everybody that there is no space in these challenging economic times. There is no space in this world, in Sri Lanka, for corruption and for wastage. And to those ministers and their henchayas who are dependent almost on corruption and wastage to make their money, let's think about the people out there, the Republic of Sri Lanka, the sovereign people who are suffering and have suffered for long years and continue to suffer. The government of the day and the opposition parties of the day must take it into their heads that there is no space in Sri Lanka for corruption, wastage, and especially for a lack of planning. There is obviously a planning deficit in this country, where our politicians seem to think that 5 years in Parliament is, apart from getting their pension, it is meant for them to make money. Well, you know, the public knows that that is simply not true, and when it's their turn, they will obviously vote the other way. But in that context, it is absolutely essential that opposition parties take it to their heads to have a plan ready and able and willing, RAW, ready, able and willing to get into action from the word go, not to wait until the mistakes of the present government perhaps will lead to their removal at the next election, and then start planning. It is time that all opposition parties came together, sat down together and made a plan that will be shown to be ready, able and willing to take Sri Lanka forward. On that note, as we report from live and direct from Marine Drive in Colombo 4 on the fuel crisis and amongst the long queues of people, it's time to say thank you for watching Newsline Live, and as always, God bless you.